let's unwind to Huawei's new Mate 20 Pro. Now, I want you to tell us a little bit about this, and will it be something that we can even buy here in North America?
Well, yes, but only I can. So I don't think you'll be able to. So Huawei's products come to Canada. The United States has had a problem with Huawei just because of some of the executive owners happen to also be former Chinese military and with extreme ties to the government. So the United States is concerned about spying and hardware. And I personally think it's maybe a little bit of protectionism for Apple. I'm not sure. But for whatever reasons, the whole rest of the world doesn't seem to be afraid of Huawei's phones except for the United States. So this is the P20. Now, what's really neat is it's a great phone, but also the P30, which Huawei releases every year as well, tends to be their big flagship device. I would probably compare it to, say, the Note 9 or the Note series for Samsung. But the 20 always comes out this time of year, and then the 30 usually comes out the following year in the spring. So the 30 that came out this year was the first three camera phone, and it was doing amazing things in low light, as well as having a telephoto lens. And it's been an all-around great phone, specifically for the camera. So the new Mate 20, this one also comes with three cameras, and it is the best phone that Huawei produces now. If you want to wait for an even better phone, I prefer the 30, but this is a pretty neat phone. It is feature-packed. I personally feel like it's got too many features. So, for example, it has an in-screen fingerprint sensor, which is great, but it also has the infrared giant notch that Apple has to send out those little infrared dots to do Face ID. So I almost feel like Huawei couldn't commit to one way or the other to unlock the phone. So you've got giant notch and you have an in-screen fingerprint sensor. I would have thought maybe you can bring the price point down a little bit by just focusing on one or the other. So we do know that OnePlus will be focusing more on the in-screen fingerprint sensor. But this one has both. So if you like that, if you like the options, and you know what? Maybe it's more useful when you're driving to just smile at your phone and have it unlock. I guess we'll have to test it.
I like that it has both, actually. I mean, some people might feel a little more comfortable with their fingerprint, but other people might like the face one.
Well, Huawei says they are protecting your face information, right? Because
in China.
Yeah, in China. In China, of course, the United States government doesn't feel that that's very protected. And also your fingerprint information. I mean, that's important. If you think about it, these phones are collecting our fingerprints. That's kind of interesting. They're collecting our biometric identification. Do we care about that? I don't know if we've had much discussion on that on this show, but we're putting a lot of trust in these companies, and some of these companies may come and go. And what happens if Huawei, now I don't think Huawei will disappear, but what about some of the smaller ones that we may be testing and trying, and then what happens to all that intellectual information when the company is sold or bought out, and who can buy it, and is that something we really want? So maybe the U.S. government might be right to be a little bit hesitant, but I personally feel it's a little bit of protectionism.
Well, I think it could be sold to the highest bidder. I mean, really, that's where they're making most of their money, is off of our information and our data. And like you said, now that they have our biometrics, that's even more so.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, I use my fingerprint to get into my banking information on my phone. So if somebody sold my fingerprint to somebody else and all you had to do was hack the phone to trick it and say, okay, now you're into my bank, now you can transfer funds, you can
and
do all
they could
kinds of
even
things.
Own that condo in Fort McMurray that you love so much, right?
Please come and
Hack
own
my
my
phone.
condo. Hack it. So let's get into some of the specs on this phone. It's actually it's a beautiful phone. It's quite large, actually. It's a 6.39-inch QHD OLED screen. It's huge. It's gigantic. But actually, they have a smaller, more budget-friendly model that is not an OLED screen. It's an LED screen LCD screen, and it's actually a little bit bigger, and it's got a little tiny notch. It doesn't have the face recognition. It's got the teardrop notch that we've seen in the P6, the OnePlus 6 phones that are coming out here. The battery is huge. This is a 4,200 milliamp battery. And
that is huge.
It is huge, and there's something really neat about the battery, but let's go through some of the other specs, and then I want to get back to the battery. So it also has Huawei's Kirin 980 processor. So this is the first that Huawei's been able to produce at 7 nanometers. Now, as you noted in this article, they're matching Apple's A12 chips from the 2018 phones. So this is pretty neat. And it's their own proprietary chip. So they can manufacture it to be special on the Huawei phones.
How do they do that? How are they, are they copying Qualcomm? Are they copying Apple? How are they making their own processor?
Honestly, I don't know. I know that Samsung in the past has created their own processors. I know that they do it for their watches, their smartwatches. They've also created their own operating systems to go along with it. Huawei also released a smartwatch today that doesn't use Wear OS and does their own operating system. So I guess we'll have to see whether Qualcomm, which has all the money, or ARM has quite a bit of funding, has been around forever, if they can stay on top, or if some of these more proprietary chips like Apple has done can actually take over and be quite competitive. But it sounds like it just may be, and I guess we'll have to see how tests and speed tests go on these phones.
It's fascinating. I've noticed a trend. I don't know if you've noticed this, that it seems like Google is moving away from Android and they're going more towards Chrome OS. And I wonder if maybe Huawei is using Android, and if there might be a fork in the road in the near future where Google starts to go more towards Chrome, and everyone else is going to just be left with an old fork of Android.
That's an interesting thought. And personally, let's simplify. Why have Android and Chrome OS? I get it that Chrome OS is for Chromebooks and it's supposed to be more of your desktop computing software made simple, but it uses the Play Store, right? So, why have two? Let's just create one. And let's make it seamless between the phones and the computers. I mean, my phone's practically a computer already. And for the prices we're paying for these phones, it's the same as what we'd pay for a computer anyways. And so I think we're going to see the lines blurring. We saw the lines blur between tablets and phones, and now we're going to see phones and computers blur. We're already seeing it with Samsung, and I'm trying to remember the feature they have where you can plug your new Samsung phone into a screen, and it will mimic. Yeah, and it mimics a desktop. So, give it a few more years, and I think that maybe we will see a unification between the operating systems on phones and desktops. So, let's talk about the cameras, and then let's get back to the battery, because this is kind of the neat feature that it might be the feature that people run out and buy it for. So you've still got your 3 cameras. You've got a 40 megapixel standard camera on the back. You have an 8 megapixel telephoto camera. Love the telephoto, Dan. I am not a fan of digital zoom, although Pixel 3 had a really interesting way of doing the enhanced feature that we talked about last week. So that's great to have the 3 times optical zoom, and it has, this is new, a 20 megapixel ultra wide angle camera. So you're going to see arms reaching around and grabbing bigger selfies.
Perverts rejoice. Just take a picture of the apartment complex next to you and zoom in.
Rejoice. Okay, so let's talk about the really neat thing about this phone, the feature. It will allow you, so not only will it have wireless charging, but it will also wirelessly charge other phones.
How is that possible? Like a network of charging?
Yeah, so it actually showed that if you picked up this phone and put another phone that can wirelessly charge onto the back of it, it will charge that phone. So at first I thought, why? Well, here's a few reasons. Number one, it's a huge battery. It's 4,200 milliamps. That's pretty big. Number two, what about having your phone plugged into the wall and then somebody else's phone attached to it, wirelessly charging off of that.
That would be cool.
Yeah, so that's kind of cool. So if you're traveling somewhere with a friend, then, juice up both phones at once if there's only one outlet. Also think about sneaking up next to your friend and your battery's about to die, and you could just sort of vampire life drain
Also, am I going to get cancer by being close to this chain of air connected chargers?
I don't know. People have been worried about cell phones and cancer for decades now, so we'll see.
Oh, you should put it right next to your head while you're charging you and your wife's phone while you're sleeping and see what happens.
So Dan, have you heard how much this phone's going to cost?
Well, I'm guessing since it's not the iPhone 10, less than 1,000. How much is it?
It is, so it's 1,049 euros, and I threw it into exchange just to see what it comes out to. $1,214 US.
That's a laptop, my friend.
Yes, it is. So I guess you gotta have deep pockets if you want to wirelessly charge your buddy's phone. Like I said, there is a cheaper version of the phone that doesn't have the Face ID, doesn't have the OLED screen, has a little bit smaller battery, but the actual phone itself, the footprint is a little bit bigger. Maybe that's the one people are going to go for. Personally, I'm going to wait around for the P30 that will come out next year, see how that goes. But man, if they're going to keep at this price point, I'm kind of surprised, actually.
So just so I'm clear about it, the one that doesn't have the Face ID still has the fingerprint reader in the screen, and it's cheaper and has less of a notch. That's the one I'm going to buy, right?
Yeah, but I didn't actually throw that one through exchange. It could still be $1,000. I hope not. Not for an LCD screen, but yeah.